Hello, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you for attending. We're just going to go over some ground rules because this is a brand new format for this task force. So I just want to remind everybody that the task force, the procedural rules as we go into our first task force virtual meeting to assist the meeting in operating as efficiently as possible. All members will be muted for the meeting to reduce feedback. All web cameras for council members must be turned on. Staff will be requested to join the meeting should they be needed to answer questions of members of council. Any members of the task force should indicate they wish to speak by pressing the raise hand button on the participant list screen. The chair, me, will track raise hands to generate the speakers list and will lower the hand when you have been added. So if you raise it and it disappears, I've got you noted. In the event of a connection service interruption, that affects quorum of council, we will recess the meeting for up to 15 minutes to regain quorum. If quorum is not achieved, the meeting will be adjourned. All members of the task force participating via online video conference will vote by a physical show of hands. The clerks will assist in the vote. Okay, roll call has been taken by the deputy clerk. Item number 2, are there any declarations of a pecuniary interest to declare on the items appearing on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none. 3, presentations, delegations. Members, there were no written delegations received on tonight's agenda. Item number 4, 4.1, the minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder for approval of the minutes? Okay, moved by Councillor McCreary, seconded by Councillor Martin. All in favor? Councillor Sless, there we go.
At this point in time, I will call out the names of persons.
Can't really hear you, Chris.
Oh, at this point, I will list the names of persons wishing to vote in favor. And one.
Can't hear you, Chris. Those headsets don't seem to work with the laptops.
Can't hear you, Chris.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so Councillor McCreary voted in favor. Councillor Weaver in favor. Councillor Antosky in favor. Councillor Martin in favor. Mayor Davis in favor. Councillor Vanderstelt in favor. Councillor Wall in favor. Councillor Martin in favor. And Councillor Sless in favor. Thank you.
All right, moving right along, items for consideration, 5.1. Please note, item 5.1 is a deferral from the previous code of conduct meeting. The main motion and the amendment are pending and are automatically on the floor. So 5.1, code of conduct for members of council and local boards, use of social media, financial impact none, 2020-94 deferral. Okay, is there any discussion? Mayor Davis?
Thank you very much, Councillor Wall. I'd like to thank you very much for chairing a meeting. It's a real delight to not be sitting in that chair. I want to put on the floor an amendment. So I guess I'll just put it out there and then I'll explain what I'm trying to do. So putting an amendment on the floor, seeking a seconder. I believe Councillor McCreary has told me he'll second it. And the amendment reads as follows, that staff be directed, so this is an amendment to what we're seeing in front of us, that staff be directed to propose comprehensive amendments to the code of conduct for members of council, including provisions related to social media use and additional provisions to bring the city's code of conduct in line with comparator municipalities, and that staff consult with the Integrity Commissioner on the proposed amendments prior to circulating the proposed amended code to members of the task force for review, and that a meeting of the task force be scheduled as soon as possible to discuss and review the proposed amended code of conduct. And I believe the clerk is also suggesting, Chris is also suggesting I add to that something that C and D be deleted, because C and D requires us to report on February 25th, 2020, which that's not happening now. So that's the mover, and Councillor McCreary is the seconder. By way of explanation, And I apologize, it's not out to you in a written format. This is bringing this together at the very last minute. But you may recall that every time we've discussed this, I've been concerned that what we're trying to do is build into the social media provisions in respect to the code of conduct that probably should apply more generally to our code of conduct. And so what I did over the weekend was I looked at the code of conduct from the county of Brant, which is much different than ours. And then I went all across Ontario. I started with Kenora, looked at Kenora, Thunder Bay, Sudbury, Sault Ste. Marie, and I did about 40 different municipalities. And I realized that, our code of conduct, there isn't much in our code of conduct. And that
Excuse me, Mayor Davis?
Yep.
Sorry, I'm just under direction from clerks here. Currently, there is an amendment on the floor, which you mentioned, that clause C and D of item 5.1 be struck out and replaced with the following. It was moved by yourself and Councillor Weaver. Oh, sorry, one moment. Sorry, so I apologize, it's clause B, that the following recommended language be included.
Okay,
So we need to deal with that before we can
fair enough.
introduce yours. So
Let's deal with it.
we can either rescind this because it seems like your suggestions are including this, or we can vote on this and then add on to this.
Well, if I moved it, if
And
Councillor
Councillor
Weaver,
Weaver seconded.
so I'd like to withdraw it if Councillor Weaver agrees.
Councillor Weaver?
I would agree with that, but I believe it was Councillor McCreary. But I'd be happy to second it as well if Councillor McCreary does.
Yeah, so the original amendment is you and Mayor Davis. It was moved by you, Councillor Weaver, and seconded by Mayor
Okay.
Davis. So I guess Councillor Weaver, would you like to withdraw it?
Yes, please.
Okay, and Mayor Davis, you're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm totally okay with that.
Okay, it is rescinded. Mayor Davis, please continue.
Yeah, so you have in front of you now, thank you, staff, Chris, for getting that up. And so, when we had the Integrity Commissioner here, our new one, remember I asked him, I said, what do you think about our code of conduct? And he told us, well, it meets the statutory requirements, but it's bare bones. And I quickly realized that when I was going across the province, looking at codes of conduct, our code of conduct really just states what our statutory responsibilities are, like under the Human Rights Code and Municipal Act, and really only says, be respectful and don't leer at one another, which it has to be, frankly, the most bare bones code of conduct that I've seen anywhere in Ontario. And I come at it as a lawyer who operates under, and I still do as a lawyer, a very detailed code of professional conduct that aspires to, very high levels of ethical and professional behavior. And so I'm used to that. And I find our code of conduct a strange little beast, and I emphasize little. So the purpose of this amendment is, so I've been working with Heidi, and we've got a proposal that we think we'd like to submit to council, but we certainly want to review with our Integrity Commissioner, not for him to write it, but just to comment on it. And then I'd like to bring that back with staff and the Integrity Commissioner's input to our next code of conduct meeting, which I hope would be fairly shortly, because I don't think I need more than 2 to 3 weeks. Heidi and I working on this with some input from Tanya and Chris and our Integrity Commissioner, with a more expansive rearrangement, shall we say, of our code of conduct, to basically to improve it to what appear to be best practices across the province. So I'm hoping this amendment will pass, which gives us an opportunity, I think, to really take a hard look at our code of conduct. Instead of looking at individual little clauses, really look at it in its entirety and see if we can be better served by a more comprehensive code of conduct.
Okay, so you're moving that amendment
Yes.
and seconded by?
This one's seconded by Councillor McCreary, I believe.
That's
I'll
correct.
second it. You'll confirm. Thank you very much. Okay, so now the item is on the floor. We have discussion up first. Councillor Sless.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in agreement with what's being discussed because I've reviewed a few cities myself, and yeah, we are woefully under policyed in this regard. I believe earlier today everybody got a an email from Councillor Utley indicating that he had hurt his knee and wasn't able to, I guess he's in excruciating pain and he's on his way to the doctor to get x-rayed to see what's wrong. But he posed a question and he asked that I ask it for him. And I guess it would go through you, Mr. Chair, to Heidi. And he's just indicating, are there any rules governing third-party violations to other councillors in the code of conduct? So I don't know if Heidi could address that or not.
Through the chair, Heidi DeVries, City Solicitor. By that, I would take it that he means outside parties, aside from members of council who violate the rights of members of council or otherwise impugn members of council and that type of thing. If that's the actual question, the answer to that is no. The code is intended to actually address the conduct of our members, both of council and of local boards. It is not intended to address the conduct of the public. When the public comes into our workplace, they're governed by our respectful workplace policy in terms of steps that the city might be able to take to remove offending individuals from the workplace. Also, when they come into council meetings or other meetings of committee, they're governed by our procedural bylaw in terms of the ability of the chair to restrain that behavior. But if you're talking about behavior of members of the public towards members of council or that type of thing, then that is not the intent of the code of conduct for members of council.
Okay, I'm simply reading his question, so I'm not really sure what his intent was, Heidi. It just says, are there any rules governing third-party violations to other councillors in the code of conduct? Are there any rules governing third-party violations to other councillors in the code of conduct? That was the question. So I guess you've answered that it's not covered by this policy.
No, and through the chair, if the third party is a member of staff, that's governed by the staff code of conduct. If the third party is a member of one of your task forces or committees, they may be governed by the city's code of conduct as well, as it relates in some instances to volunteers. If it's a committee or a local board as defined in this particular section of the Municipal Act, then the code of conduct for members of council would extend to the local boards as members. But if it's just a third party member of the public, then no.
So if I could just ask and try and interpret what I think John is saying there, if a member of the public says derogatory things about a councillor, is that up to that councillor to defend himself, or is the power of the municipality, that councillor being an employee of that municipality, is it covered through that?
So through the chair, no, councillors aren't employees of the municipality. Councillors are elected officials and they are not considered employees. So basically, no, it's not covered by that. And I think that, again, I wasn't present for the entire Code of Conduct task force meeting the last time, but I think that gives rise to other questions about, and I know some members of council have raised this, indemnification of members of council, where they're left to take matters into their own hands, so to speak, with respect to restraining that type of behavior, either through the courts or through some sort of cease and desist letter. So typically, even legal counsel for the corporation would not be participating in that type of thing unless somebody applies for indemnification through the city's indemnification policy. So if someone is making derogatory statements about you, it would be up to the individual counselor to restrain that or attempt to address that type of behavior, which is, I understand, fairly awkward. If somebody is defaming you or committing libel or slander, then the city has an indemnification policy, which I can say is about as old as the Code of Conduct, I believe, and very difficult to access for members of council. I haven't undertaken a complete review of that particular policy, but I will be in the future because I believe that that is something that has been raised a few times now and should be given an adequate review by staff in order to ensure that it actually responds in situations that councillors are finding themselves in, particularly given that it's so easy to make comments now on social media. It's a much broader public forum.
I appreciate that explanation, and I'll certainly pass that along to Councillor Utley when the meeting's over. Thanks, Heidi.
That's everything, Councillor Sless?
Yes, that's fine. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you for your comments about Councillor Utley. I should have mentioned that at the start of the meeting, and I'm sure everyone here wishes him a speedy recovery. I know that he also hurt his back picking up garbage in our community too, so he's down for the count. Next on the speaking list is Councillor McCreary.
Chair, thank you, and what a good job you're doing today, my friend. I'm happy to second this and support. I think it makes more sense to have a comprehensive look at what we're doing rather than to do what we've done sort of to date, which is to look at the bits and pieces.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Councilor McCurry. Are there any other first-time speakers? Okay, seeing none, I've got a quick question. I think we just addressed this at the last meeting, but I just want to ask the question again. Does anything that we are deciding on or any of the work that should this amendment move forward, does it cover members of citizen committees?
You want me to- I guess Heidi could answer that.
I can answer that. I'm sure the mayor can too. No, this only applies to local boards as they are defined under the Municipal Act.
So I remember hearing something that members of citizen committees have to follow a code of conduct similar to what staff have to follow, though, regarding conduct about city, like things that they're involved with in the city or city matters. Is there any truth to that?
To you, Chair. Yes, I believe Chris Gauthier, our clerk right now, a deputy clerk, circulated the employee code of conduct. And you can see in that code that in certain instances, volunteers and members of our committees are captured by aspects of the code of conduct that for staff. So that would be the staff code of conduct, which is then applied to individuals working in certain capacities as volunteers for the city.
Okay. So no other first-time speakers. Mayor Davis, is there anything else you'd like to add before we go to the vote?
Nope.
Yes, so under direction from the clerk, clause B seems to have become unnecessary with the new amendments. So unless there's any input from council, we're going to strike clause B and just include the new amendment.
Yeah, that was my intent.
So B, C, and D will all be replaced and removed and changed. Okay, so seeing no other speakers in the list, I call the vote. Chris, could you take the vote?
You're still muted if you're taking the vote, Chris.
Yeah.
Counselor McCurry,
Yep,
Counselor Vanderstel, Counselor Wall, Counselor Martin, Counselor Sless, Counselor Weaver, Mayor Davis, Counselor Antosky. Motion carries.
Okay, and now we'll call the vote on the motion as amended. So once again, if everyone could raise their hand and Chris will read the vote.
I'll just start with all those who opposed. Please raise your hands just to make things a bit easier. Okay, carries unanimously on a recorded vote with Counselor McCreary, Counselor Vanderstel, Counselor Wall, Counselor Martin, Counselor Sless, Counselor Weaver, Mayor Davis, and Counselor Antosky all voting in favor. The motion as amended carries.
Well done, team. So we move now into item number 6, resolutions. There are no resolutions. Item number 7, notice of motion. There are no notices of motion. And with that, let me find the gavel. Mayor Davis hung it out. We're going to adjourn. Meeting is completed. Thank you very much, everybody, for our first digital task force. We made history here tonight.
Well done.
Thank you, Councillor Wall.
good night, folks.
Night. See you tomorrow.